Hello, my name's Osha. I like to talk about American history, and I've been following updates on the is it war between America and Israel against Iran. Today's March the 2nd, 2026. I've been following the news, and I recently saw the Prime Minister of England, Sir Keir Starmer, saying that England was not going to get involved or provide support to the United States in its military strikes against Iran. Um, and, it's kind of interesting considering, just a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago, um, the president seemed to have made veiled or not so veiled threats. And NATO, at least our NATO allies were feeling threatened, and it looked like it looked like the future of NATO was fragile, and America was started to look like a bull in a china shop. And there are talks about NATO allies perhaps looking for uh, uh, alternatives, right, with regard to their security. Um, I could do a video and discuss what NATO is, but typically, America and our NATO allies. America is a member of NATO, a significant member of NATO. But of course, when President Trump was indicating his interest in seizing Greenland and things like that, and of course, our NATO allies, European allies, got offended, and it appeared, they were feeling threatened. Um, and of course, uh, with the kidnapping of the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, at the beginning of the year, there was talk about the U.S. having violated international law, the rules-based international order, which America actually championed, right? So, and just recently on February 28th, 2026, there was the political assassination of the supreme leader of Iran. That's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. So these actions violate international law. I'm a lawyer. It's interesting that I'm saying these things because I actually took international law at Oxford. I did international human rights law. International human rights law is part of international law. I did it at University of Oxford. Um, so um, so that's why this is sort of interesting to me, because America, we were a big champ. We were big, huge proponents and drafters of international law, international order. So if we're the ones breaking the norms of international law and laws of war, what does that mean? So it's like we're setting a bad precedent, and others can go ahead. We're setting a bad precedent for others to target our political leaders, right, for assassination as well. We're setting a bad precedent for others who have the means and the ability to come in and invade and kidnap our president as well. Um, the president has said, well, this is supposed to be a limited decapitation strike, for regime change. Again, regime change is also illegal in under the United Nations Charter. Um, just something that I'm going to do. I'm going to, um, there's a saying in my culture, and it's in Bible. Actually, the reason why I decided to do this is this particular video is I want to talk about a little bit about Iran and Israel, because these are two historical figures, right? Two historical countries, right? They're major centers of world history and civilization, right? So these are if you study history, you're going to come across, uh, you know, or religion. You're going to come across Israel, the Jewish people. You're going to come across um, Iran. Iran, another name for them is Persia. They're the Persian Empire, right? So you study them, you encounter them in history, in religion, and by the way, so these two, they go back thousands of years, millennia, right? That's Israel and Israel and Iran, right? The historically, right? Historically. So I'm thinking in terms of history right now. And by the way, in history, 100 years is a very short time. So I'm thinking of in terms of history. So these are millennia and things like that. There's a saying. So I'm going to refer us to the Bible, and for people who are very into religion, and sometimes they like to frame all of Israel's actions in terms of religion, right? Uh, there's a saying in my culture, and it's also in the Bible, right? It's also in the Bible, uh, in the book of Proverbs 26, uh, 17. Proverbs 26, 17. It says that, like a man who grabs a stray dog by the ears is one who meddles in a quarrel that's not his own, right? And there's also Proverbs 20, verse 3, that says that it is honorable to end strife, right? It's honorable for one to end strife, but any fool can start a fight, right? Any fool can start a fight. It's honorable for one to end strife. These are in the book of Proverbs. If you want to look them up, there's Proverbs 26, verse 17, the first one I talked about, and the other one, Proverbs 20, verse 3. And this is kind of appropriate, for me, referring to the Bible and honorable things. Um, so I want to just, I'm going to go into the history of Persia, Iran, because it's very significant in history. And I've actually lived with Iranians, right? Iranians, and I've had friends, I've had many friends who were Iranians, who were Iranian Americans, clients who were Iranian Americans. I've traveled with an Iranian, and so um, it's funny that you can't help but admire their culture, right? The Persian Empire and their culture. Now, regarding the war, because we are at war currently, and again, I've done military history, and I talk about I've studied military history, and I remember, I talk about American presidents, and I remember reading President Ulysses Grant's memoirs in which he described the Civil War, right? His objective, his method was to use all the resources and manpower of the United States government, Union forces, to destroy the Confederate armies. But he indicated that had the Confederates, right, used guerrilla warfare, they would have achieved their goal because they weren't trying to seize land from America, right? They weren't trying to destroy America. That wasn't their goal. Their goal was just to secede. They didn't want to be part of the Union anymore, right? So Ulysses Grant had said, and Ulysses Grant was commander in chief of the Union armies, and he went on to become our 18th president. Ulysses Grant had indicated in his personal memoirs that had the Confederates used guerrilla warfare, continued with that, they would have actually defeated, they would have ended up defeating, not defeat, they couldn't defeat the Union because the Union had more manpower, but they would have achieved their goal. Their goal was just to secede because if the war had become protracted, so his goal was also to make sure that the war didn't become protracted because it was the ability to draw on the union's manpower and vast resources was dependent on public support, public opinion, and he said if it dragged on for too long and if public support, public opinion, the American public turned against the war and became exhausted and fed up with the war and decided well they didn't want to continue and they were like okay well just give it up, let them go, right? So that's one of the goals of people who resort to guerrilla warfare. I had mentioned that yes, America has more military capacity, vastly more resources than Iran, right? Because America is at war with Iran, right, and combined with Israel. Now, the Iranian government, the Iranian people, because that's really what's going on, right? You, if you're going to fight a war and you're saying you're defeating a government, right, you're a foreign power, you're really fighting the people, right? You're fighting the people of that nation, right? So America is fighting Iranians. That's the reality, right? So they understand they don't have the vast resources of America. So they're going to resort to unconventional methods. They're going to resort to irregular warfare. And this is something that America has to be prepared for, right? So I read in the news that, Iran had struck with missiles and drones and hit some, targets, military bases and, allies of America in the Middle East, including Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, all these, Jordan, So that's unconventional warfare. It's funny, I'd done a video before reading this, was it yesterday, and I'd mentioned that look, intelligent when you're fighting, and this is interesting for me because I'm not a violent person. I don't like warfare. I don't like, but again, because I've studied military history, and apart from that, personally growing up, I did martial arts and I studied it. I practiced martial arts, right? I did taekwondo, I did karate, I boxed, I learned all these things, not to fight, not I never went into competition, but I learned it personally for myself. If you're a guy and you do, learn martial arts and things like that, it's also good, and I lift weights, I bodybuild. I used to do that, engage in bodybuilding. It's good for your confidence. So maybe that's the reason why, you know, I don't know. People don't pick fights with me personally. Maybe there's a way they see me carry myself. So it's funny that even while I was wrongfully detained. I've done videos talking about my wrongful detention. People just didn't pick fights with me, and they fight all the time in jail. They fight all the time in the institutions I was sent to wrongfully, right, or based on the malicious prosecution. So, but maybe there's a way I carry myself. I know how to defend myself, but I don't get involved in fights, right? I wouldn't do that. So the reason why I'm saying this is that when you know how to fight, right, you understand, you have action and reaction. You plan steps that your opponent is going to do and how you're going to defend yourself. Now, Iran is at war with America. Iran knows America has more resources, more power, and think more weapons, more advanced weapons. I don't know what it is that Iran has. I don't know what they have in their arsenal. But America can expect that Iran's not going to fight a conventional warfare with them. They're not obligated to do so, especially since America is the one who's violated standards of war, international standards, right? They violated, I talked about just war and things like that. America's not fighting a just war. America attacked Iran, decapitated, they violated the international law by killing the president, the leader of Iran, their supreme leader, and things like that, and some of their uh, military leaders. So Iran is entitled to self-defense. Is Iran going to use conventional methods, regular methods that will only favor America and allow America to defeat it? No, it's not going to do that. So it's going to use unconventional warfare. It's probably going to use some acts of terrorism and a variety of things. It's probably going to target citizens of America that will put America in a state to cause America's citizens to rise against their government. The reason why I know this, I'm a historian, right? I study. Um, there was an American general, General Mattis. He once was Secretary of Defense. Um, they said he read a lot of books thousands and thousands of books. He studied wars, and his notion, his idea was that every war there's a history, that every war has a precedent. Every war that's to be fought has a precedent. So you can, if you more you study wars, it's right. The options available to you, they've been exercised in the past. You resort to historical wars to plan your own strategy, right? So I'm going to get into the history. So it's kind of interesting because America has placed itself in which um, we've just recently threatened our allies, NATO, right? And we've not used soft power, diplomacy. We haven't used it well. We're the strongest power in the world. But if we're acting psychotic, if the American government leadership is acting like it's suffering some kind of neurosis, it becomes dangerous because our power was supposed to be the one that was stable and was protecting the rest of the world. But if we're now looking psychotic, that looking that the US power is going to be threatening other people, acting erratically, getting involved in fights that it shouldn't be getting into, threatening other powers. I'm not supporting the Iranian government, Islamic government. That's not what I'm doing, right? I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that the Islamic government in Iran is good, but again, it's not our job to dictate uh, other nations' government how they're constituted, right? That's a violation of United Nations laws, the Charter, which we superintended, which we designed. America designed it, right? We can't be just fighting. Iran was not threatening us, and now, so we're saying we wanted to destroy Iran's capability of building nuclear weapons. I thought we already achieved that last year, right? We already were supposed to have. The president, when last year, America said it degraded Iran's capability of building nuclear weapons. By the way, this is something that I also wanted to talk about to get into history. Um, Iran has is one of the oldest civilizations in the world, right? And that's what I want to do today. I'm going to get into their civilization. Iranians, as I was saying, I have Iranian friends, Iranian Americans. They were born here. They're one of the few rare people that, even though they were born here, they call themselves Persian or Iranian. They let you know. When you meet an Iranian, even though my Iranian friends, again, I've lived with Iranians, there's this class about them, classiness, there's this dignity about them. They're not aggressive, right? There's something, classy, warmth. There's a lot of warmth. They're very lovable people. There's so much warmth in them. But it's constitutionally Iranian. Maybe amongst all the ones that it's only the elite that come here, right? It's constitutionally Iranian to let you know. I mean, you get that sense that they know they're highly intelligent people. They know they're intelligent and they value their culture. That it's a higher civilization. It's old. They value that. Whether it's their poetry, Rumi is very very popular. Their poetry, their literature, Rumi, you hear that a lot of that, or their religion, and I'm going to get into all of that. So America is now at war, bombing, you know, bombing, bombing Iranian lands, home to one of the oldest civilizations in the world, continuing civilizations in the world. No matter how much division or Iranians in Iran or Iranians here in America against express their dissatisfaction or resentment against their government, right? The Islamic government states there. Um, Again, from what I read and from my culture, it says when two brothers, two members of the same household or whatever, they're fighting, you shouldn't get involved in their fights. Leave them, let them resolve their quarrels. America, for instance, we're always divided, half from the beginning of this country, right? We started out half were enslaved, another half hated slavery, half, supported slavery, another half did not support slavery. That's how our two-party system evolved. It's not in our constitution, but it's just because of that division, 50-50. So, but there's at least half of Americans did not want President Trump to be president. So because of the half uh, of the American public that opposes President Trump, does that mean that we would subscribe to a foreign invader to abduct our president or to assassinate him? Absolutely not. That would be criminal. We have a method to remove the president, right? We go to the polls, right? He has 4 years, he's used 1 year, we go to the polls, right? We should learn to exercise the golden rule. You do unto others what you expect them to do unto you. We don't want any foreign invader to come and assassinate our president or to remove our president, even though half of us, half of the nation doesn't want him to be our president, right? Similar to Iran, right? The Islamic government or whatever, there in Iran, they can't exist if there's no support for them. Yes, there's a certain section that doesn't want them, but there's another section that wants them, right? But we shouldn't get involved in another nation's affairs, and that's basically just how. That's how. Those are the standards of international law, right? The principles of international law which we helped establish. No political assassinations, no regime change. So we don't look like a credible force when we are not following the rules that we established, right? We don't look genuine. We don't look like honest brokers, right? So, and I wonder, as even Iranian Americans, I wonder how long their support for America's strikes against Iran will last. Because, again, their homelands, their ancestral lands, Iran still has their ancestral lands, which goes back 3,000 years, over 3,000 years. And America is bombing those sites, destroying that culture that Iranian Americans are very proud of, right? How long will their support for America, the American president, last? Even though they're born here, they're Iranians. The thing that makes them very proud, right? You immediately see it amongst Iranians. They're very proud of their culture, their heritage as Persians, right? If you look everywhere, whether it's in the Bible, you'll see Iranians. By the way, this was what I want to talk about: Cyrus the Great. So, in the Bible, we talk about Cyrus the Great in the Bible, how he freed. There was a Persian king who freed the children of Israel, like the Hebrews, freed the Hebrews from the Babylonian captivity. Right? He was prophesied of. He's in several books in the Bible, whether it's Ezra, Second Chronicles, he's in Isaiah, he's in Daniel, where God is even prophesying that he knew Cyrus, knew him from his mother's womb, he called him by name, right? That's a Persian, that's an Iranian, right? In fact, Cyrus is the only person in the Bible that's called the Messiah who is not Hebrew. He's the only person in the Bible that's referred to as an anointed one or a Messiah. And he wasn't a Hebrew. He didn't follow the Hebrew God. That's Cyrus the Great, the Persian. You can go and read it, This is, I guess, this addresses Christians. So they have this great history that is is codified and they refer to. So when they're seeing the ancestral lands that that is home to this great civilization, ancient civilization that they've had, how long are they going to support its destruction? Because those bombings are destroying their ancestral lands, right? When I lived in Italy, went to school in Italy, I remember my roommate was Roman. He was so proud that he would point out to me. I didn't even know until he told me, and I went to check it out. He said he claimed Italy had the most historical sites in the world, in most recognized historical landmarks or whatever sites in the United Nations that are recognized as historical landmarks, right? So they have the Colosseum there. You can go and see the ancient civilization. The place Julius Caesar walked through, the things that Augustus built. You can see them in Italy, in Rome. If a foreign nation had bombed all their civilization, all their whatever, so that they can no longer point to the historical sites, Italians wouldn't be happy because Roman civilization is part of Western civilization, Western culture. But Persians have a civilization that's just as great as the Roman civilization, right? In fact, the Persians, they've had their Persian Renaissance. Yes, people see them as Muslim, but they go back a very, very long time. That saying that Julius Caesar said, I came, I saw, I conquered, Veni, Vidi, Vici. He was referring to the Persians, the Parthian Empire. So they've had several empires, succeeding empires, right, within that Persian region, amongst the Persian people, right? People known as Iranians. Julius Caesar, the Romans fought them as a Parthian empire. He conquered them, so Veni Vidi Vici. That saying he said it was the Parthians that he was referring to. But every conquest was just temporary. They come back and they'll fight you. They'll shake it off. That was what the Persians did. So nobody's ever conquered them for long. They'll they'll fight them. They'll end the conquest. No foreign power has succeeded long in occupying them, right? Various Roman emperors, they would sack their capital. Back then, the capital of the Parthian Empire was Ctesiphon, right? They'd sack it, but eventually they'd repel them. So Rome never actually, when Rome was the most powerful empire in the world, they were never able to fully conquer the Persians. The Persians would come back and they kick them out. Eventually, when the Parthian Empire of uh, 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 the is it the Achaemenid Empire, that was under, I think that was what Cyrus had. Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great was about 6th century BC. When they were eventually conquered and they fell due to internal strife. They fell to the Sassanids, right? Their own people. So it's their own people that can defeat them or conquer them, and they continue. When they were At one time they were conquered by the Arabs, but eventually they kicked out the Arabs, right? And they kept the Islamic religion, but they infused it with their own Persian identity and culture and their language. They fused Islam with their own identity and language and everything. So they've been doing that. So they've existed. They're used to warfare. They're used to fighting. They've just existed for a very long time, right? So it's in history, nobody's managed to be able to conquer them for long. Alexander the Great went, but again, you may sack their capital, but it's just temporary. They're going to kick you out. They're going to fight you. They're going to get rid of you. So they fight. So they're people used to warfare. They're people who are very intelligent. They believe in their intelligence, right? They operate by that. Um, in America, there's this joke. And it's true. All the people I know, the Iranian I lived with was a medical student. He was doing his residency. He was a medical student. All the Iranians I know, they're either lawyers or medical doctors in America, right? And that's not to stereotype people. Well, I knew one. The only one who was not a medical doctor or a lawyer was an investment banker. And investment bankers make more money than medical doctors and lawyers, right? Um, he was in an investment, but he was in a training in investment banking with me. So, how long will that support? Will Iranians in America give that support to watching the destruction of their ancestral lands? So uh, America keeps saying that we want to stop uh, Iranians from having, uh, you know, nuclear weapons. That had been degraded last year, right? Their ability to, uh, their facilities for building a nuclear program, that was ostensibly destroyed last year, right? So got to be very careful. It's not every and particularly now that what reason why I decided to do this video was I was kind of like concerned the fact that England, the British Prime Minister was saying, well, they were not going to get involved in this. They were going to sit this one out. So it's almost like um, people who are experts in war, right? They use crisis. They use crisis well. Revolutionaries, right? You see, was it Karl Marx who said, "Never waste a good crisis," right? They use times of war. So you see the Bolshevik Revolution that happened in Russia was during the First World War. That was when the revolutionaries, the communists, right? They used the opportunity to overthrow the Tsarist Empire because that's a time that one who's at war. That's a time that they're weak. America's at war. America just, our president appeared to have just recently threatened NATO, our strongest allies, right? And now you see members of NATO saying, well, they're gonna sit this one out. So it's almost like they're probably going to be happy to see America's power erode, decimate. Again, Iran, Iran might surprise America with its allies, right? But even though Iranians, right, they have a different brand of Islam, but their government was shrewd enough to invest in sponsor terrorists who have a different brand of Islam from from them. And I'm not saying that Muslims are terrorists. No, I'm saying sects that claim to be to espouse, claim that their actions are based on religion, but they're not. They don't practice the brand of Islam that the Iranian leadership, Iranian people practice. So they can manage to reframe this as a religious war. It will be very easy for them to reframe what's going on as a religious war, and you see allies sprouting from various places sporadically to engage in unconventional warfare. Am I saying that okay, that the West or America should feel afraid or alarmed or be held to ransom uh, by terrorists? No, that's not what I'm saying. But at the same time, you don't you pick your battles carefully, right? You pick your fights carefully. You don't get in again. You don't you just don't get involved in a fight that's not your own, right? You don't get involved in a fight that's not your own. Let me stop this video here and I'll continue in a subsequent video. I wanted to get into the history, the long history between the Persians and the Hebrew people, right? It goes back, it's saying so 5,000, 4,000 years, very, very ancient, So my name's Osha. I'll keep you posted.